Hey everyone, my name is Shawn Winters. Welcome. I am leading US sales for Powell Software, and along with me, we have one of our premier partners from StitchDX. He is the chief strategist and heading up the digital workspace, Erick Straghalis. Erick, welcome to our little show here. Actually, it's our inaugural one or our first one. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. Stitch is a digital strategy consulting company, and we actually started off as a digital marketing company, digital marketing strategy, and we realized that, the digital workplace is such an integral part to helping organizations be able to communicate externally. So we started doing a lot of work inside on the digital workplace side. So I head up strategy for Stitch and drive the digital workplace practice at our organization as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you for adding the additional context there. And as I mentioned, StitchDX is one of our premier partners over here at Powell. Powell Software provides this amazing, beautiful intranet experience, but we are nothing without folks like you, Eric, and StitchDX that can really carve out this unique experience for our customers by shaping the product that we provide into exactly what they want. And now, having said that, I think one thing that we can start off on and really like jump off from is like, how do you think about like, how would you define digital workplace?
I think the digital workplace is a very complex thing because we often think about the digital workplace as the intranet, but the reality is that, everything that we do, everything that we use is online and is digital. So, whether you're communicating on your cell phone or you're communicating through a Teams app or, you're working on a document in a shared space or you're working on it on your local laptop. I mean, everything that we do and everything that we use is really sort of part of the digital workplace. But the way that I think about things like the intranet, for example, particularly because we work inside of Microsoft, I think the intranet and Teams really kind of create that focal point. And it's the starting point, it's the center of that digital workplace. And all of the things that work around that digital workplace, all of the tools and SaaS, solutions and local software and cloud software and all the things that kind of revolve around that help people get their work done on a day-to-day basis are kind of part of that ecosystem. But the digital workplace itself, I think, kind of starts at that central point. And I think it's really about communication for collaboration, and it's communication for information, right? So informing people and also making sure that people are able to collaborate and get work done.
We talked last week when we were engaging with a prospect about two aspects of this intranet, right? Like this top down and then this bottom up of like the end user and then what leadership wants to provide.
So the way that we kind of approach implementations, and particularly thinking about how organizations want to use the intranet, there are things that the organization wants to make sure that everybody sees. And so those are the types of top-down communication that it's like, that's the news, that's the information that regardless of what you're interested in, this is stuff that we want to make sure you're seeing. So that could be things from, your executive team that they want to make sure that they're seeing, right? Whether it's a message from the CEO or, it's potentially like HR news, right? It's the end of year. We got to make sure that we're, doing your benefits, or that you're, doing your end of year reviews. That kind of stuff that everyone needs to be able to see and have access to, and you want to make sure that people are engaged with. And then there's the other side, which is the sort of what I call the bottom up, right? This is like, how do employees think about information? How do employees want to engage information? Not everybody's going to look for the same thing. Not everybody's going to be interested in the same thing. And so the question there is, what are users really interested in? What do they really need access to? And so we want to make sure that we're kind of meeting both, because the bottom up is where you're going to drive engagement. So the ability for people to be able to self-select, these are the things that I'm interested in, these are the things I want to see more of, as well as the ability for the sort of corporate side to be able to push down information and say, everybody's got to see this stuff as a baseline. But then the ability for employees to be able to also self-select and say, this is going to be more relevant to me. I want to see things that are more relevant to me. That drives more engagement. So it's kind of a combination of both of those, bottom up and top down.
I love that. I love that. Exactly what I was looking for there. So there's this big thing everybody's talking about. It's called AI, artificial intelligence,
Yeah, I've
and
heard of it.
that's part of the focus of this conversation today. Is like, all right, there's this, I guess, in the world of technology, like intranets aren't anything new, right?
Yeah.
And this, this term digital workplace is ever evolving. Now that we're introducing this thing called AI, like when you think about how AI is fitting into the digital workplace and intranets, like what are the real rewards here? Like what are organizations doing to save money by using AI and introducing that into their digital workplace?
Yeah, I think it's funny. Everybody, you know, everybody, we talked about this top down, bottom up, right? Like the top down view of AI often is, how can we use AI to be more effective and more efficient and drive, cost savings? And that's also the big fear that a lot of people have around, AI is going to come for my job and it's going to take my job. Right? We're seeing that a lot now. Frankly, it's true, right? Like there are some jobs where AI is already proving to be incredibly useful, things like development and writing and content development. So yeah, there's a legitimate concern there about, AI being able to do those jobs, maybe not replacing everybody, but certainly if you've got a, staff full of writers, now AI can handle a lot of that burden and a lot of that load. And so maybe you don't need 10 writers, maybe you only need 2, and they can sort of manage and juggle a lot more because the AI can carry some of that load. Same thing with developers. Frankly, sales is starting to go that way too, right? Like we're starting to see that AI is driving a lot more, maybe not efficiency is not the right word, but it's carrying a lot more of the load. So it's enabling people to do more with less, right? Able to get a lot more access to things. I think the other side of this though is that like, hey, as a user of AI, I can also be more productive. I can get things done faster, right? So the sort of bottom up perspective of this is I'm also smarter now, right? Like I have access to so much more information. And I wrote about this in an article recently, actually. We've gone from being a search generation, right? Where like if you wanted to know something, you wanted to learn something, you Googled it, right? I mean, literally Google became a verb. And so, you just looked up the answer to the question, but the reality is that you still had to read, you still had to go through the process of like looking for that information and digging into that context. You'd look up something for, coding, right? Like, how do I do this in HTML or in Python or in JavaScript? And it'll give you a whole bunch of resources that you have to then go click into to find the answer. Now we've moved from the search generation to the ask generation. And it's no longer about having to dig through those resources to find the right answer. Now the answer is just given to us. It's just handed to us on a silver platter. So from a user perspective, it's giving us access to more relevant information faster, which just makes us smarter, right? Like now I can get to the answer a lot quicker, and I can read through that answer directly, and I can also now ask follow-up questions to dig in deeper. So the sort of bottom up perspective, I think, is, I'm going to be able to do more and be better prepared for my job and my work. The top down is definitely looking at it as a, cost savings and efficiency. And I think that there's a balance there between those two. Now, how does that play into the digital workplace? I think that, number one, AI is permeating in everything. So, in Microsoft, we're seeing it with Copilot, and we're seeing how Copilot is being leveraged both from the free chat perspective, where you can actually upload a document and it'll kind of give you a RAG experience with that document, and also from the license perspective, where if I have Copilot license, I have access. The AI has access to all of my information, right? All of my emails, my documents, my SharePoint sites, my team sites, my conversations in Teams. And so it can pull from a lot of different contexts to be able to provide relevancy and relevant answers to me. So, for example, if I'm writing a proposal, I can say, hey, look at all of the conversations I've had, look at the transcripts from the customer calls that I've had in Teams, look at our previous proposals, look at the work that we've done, and then help me build out that proposal dynamically. And it'll go and do it for me, right? It is saving time, it is saving money, but at the same time, it's also giving me the ability to provide a better user experience for my customers, because now I can pull from the knowledge from all of the experiences that I've had. And, it's sort of as acting as a quote unquote second brain. I'm sure you've heard that term, where I can't hold all of these things in my mind, but I know that there's information out there that I want to pull. And so it can go out and help me do that. So there's a lot of things that we can do with AI. And I think, well, we could talk more about this, but I think we need to have a very strategic thought process about how we apply it so it doesn't become just another tool in that digital workplace, right, that we were talking about at the very beginning, because I think that's a big problem, right?
Well, let's tap on that. Let's double click on that. Where do you think organizations fail when it comes to like implementing AI, right? Like there's
Yeah.
going to be a lot of like early adopters. There's going to be people that are like, I know we need to do this, but there's going to be have good implementations and bad. What makes the difference between somebody doing it what we consider the right way right now and people who are going to fail?
Yeah. So I think there's two things right now that are happening. Number one is AI is evolving so fast. I mean, dramatically fast. I mean, when we think about how quickly technology has evolved over the last, look at the last 50 years, right? Like from just the ability to go from, from a computer that took up an entire room to a computer that sat on our desktop to a computer that could fit on our lap to now a computer that is literally inside of our pockets. That took a long time compared to the evolution of AI. I mean, AI has actually been around for a long time. That's a thing that people don't really realize. I mean, when I say a long time, probably over more than a decade, right? Like AI has been in use and organizations have been using AI for a lot of things, particularly in manufacturing. But when it became really available to the sort of everyday public, that was like 2 years ago. It was nothing. I mean, 2 years is nothing. But look at how fast that evolution has happened in 2 years. And, I think in a matter of like weeks, ChatGPT had more users than I think Instagram had in its first year. So it tells you how quickly it's being adopted, number one. And adoption is obviously big. It's more important actually than revenue for a lot of these companies, which is why they're all running at a loss right now. But so everyone's adopting AI quickly. And because they're adopting AI quickly, there's a mad rush to be the top of that pile of the AI world. So now you have a lot of competition between, OpenAI and Meta, and even Microsoft technically is in competition a little bit, even though they're part of OpenAI. And, you've got all these different players, right? And so they're all racing to try and get, the best models, the best tools, the best functionality. And then you have all the other tools that are built up around those models. So you have literally tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of tools now. And then AI embedded in every tool that isn't, an AI tool out of the box. So it's everywhere. It's permeating. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly growing. And the biggest challenge I think that organizations have is chasing the best tool, chasing the best models, chasing the best approach, the best functionalities, like because it's evolving so quickly, companies are just, and the problem is that it's SaaS, right? Most of it's SaaS and it's ubiquitously available. I mean, whether it's on your iPhone or your Android or your laptop or it's Mac or PC, it doesn't matter. Like it's everywhere. So that means that there's very little control that IT teams have around the ability to use AI and the ability to control where that AI is being used. And so everyone's chasing constantly, like, ChatGPT came out with 5.0. Everybody was like excited about using 5.0, right? And then they all got upset about it. But like they're just constantly looking for what's next, what's cool, what's best. And they're testing and trying. I just saw this stat came out yesterday or the day before, I forget now, but it was something like 95% of all of the models that organizations are implementing are failing. And it's not necessarily because the models aren't good or because the tools aren't right. It's because we're using it and we're just trying to we're throwing spaghetti on a wall and hoping that something sticks. And all that you end up with is a mess, right? Like you end up with messy walls. So I think that's the biggest challenge is chasing the best models, the best things, the new things, the shiny object. We need to slow down. We need to stop. We need to think about AI, not as a tool, but fundamentally as a platform. And if we start thinking about AI as a platform and not as a tool, it allows us to start thinking about our processes, our workflows, and allows us to sort of break down that process and start to build up our processes and our workflows using AI. So I've been writing about this a lot, and I call it the cognitive operating model. And it's essentially a process in which we look at your existing workflows inside of your workplace. And this could be part of your digital workplace, or it could be, frankly, just workflows and, approval processes, things like that. And then we start looking at, where does AI fit into that? And well, we could talk more about this, but I'll just say this, that, somebody mentioned to me, I think AI is going to be as impactful as the intranet was. It's going to be that like game changing. And of course, like everybody nods their heads like, yeah, well, yeah, that makes sense. I actually think it's bigger than that. I think it's more impactful. I think it's going to be like electricity, because it's fundamentally changes the way that we organize and think and act. It's not just about like, oh, now I can do what I was doing in person online and open up my market share. It's beyond that. It is more fundamental. It is, I'm going to rearrange my entire workflows around this new functionality, because it lets me be more efficient, more effective, but also it helps me to drive better value across my entire workflow, my entire model, my entire chain. And so it's really about rethinking how we organize ourselves and organize our work. It's huge, right? It's game changing. But I think the biggest problem is, if we keep chasing those new, cool, exciting things and the shiny new things, it doesn't let us think about it as a platform. It constantly feels like, oh, it's a tool, and it's another tool, and there's another tool. And then pretty soon you're stringing together a bunch of tools that actually don't talk to each other, don't communicate, don't connect. And you end up almost in a worse place, because now you're kind of really siloed in how your data flows. And you've got individuals using, one tool and another individual using a different tool. And you don't get that seamless connection that I think everybody's hoping for. And that's the promise of AI, right? Like, it's going to be more seamless.
Yeah, one thing you touched on, and I think it can be overwhelming to chase all these different tools. I think it can be. I get that. I'm trying to almost think of like an analogy for it, but it feels like with something like the internet and the digital workplace, implementing something like AI into that, there is a starting ground, because it can access all of that data, like in the Microsoft 365 stack, where you can really get beyond like simple task automation and really start to enhance like human collaboration, right? Like,
Yeah.
or enable those those end users, those employees, to get information quicker, like we're seeing on Google right now, but within your ecosphere. I guess talk to me about like how you see AI fitting into this digital workplace, and like what are the first things that you would do to really bring out value and like enhance human collaboration?
Yeah. So this is something that we do at StitchDX, and we're engaged with a couple of different organizations right now in trying to do this, but it's really about being prepared for AI, right? Like, so we call it Be AI ready. In fact, that's my, a shameless plug here, my Substack, beaiready.com, or excuse me, beaiready.ai or beaiready.substack.com. But the whole purpose of Be AI ready is that you can't just throw your data into a model and expect it to come back with all the best results, right? The reality, and everybody says it, garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, that's just a nomenclature, and it's the same nomenclature we've had since before AI, right? Like, whatever you put into the system, you're going to get the same kind of level of results. So the value of AI is that it is very, very, very good at organizing information when you give it the right instructions on how to organize it. The LLMs are really good at helping to make sense of information that it has seen before. So it's really working on, structured data and the ability to recognize patterns inside of those structures. When it doesn't recognize the patterns, for example, you have a lot of policies or data that is I won't say custom, but it is unique to your organization. The way you organize your data and information, how you communicate within the organization, how you structure your data. If it hasn't seen that before, it's not going to really know what to do with it. And so there's this whole concept, it's RAG, you may have heard of it. R stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. RAG is really about taking documents, taking, structured data, information that you have, and then breaking that data down into smaller chunks, and then adding metadata to that data, to those smaller chunks, so that the AI can come back and retrieve those chunks and be able to pull together dynamically chunks that may be related to each other. So for example, or the example that I had given earlier about wanting to do a proposal, if I say, hey, I've got this type of customer, this is the type of work that they do, they're in this industry, and this is what we're going to be delivering for them. Go out and find all of the proposals that we've done that are similar to that, or the work that we've done in the past, to make recommendations and best practices against what they should and could be doing. And what it does is it basically goes out and looks for all those chunks that have that metadata that is similar, right? And so it can start pulling together dynamically from all of these different sources. Well, if your data is not prepared and the AI needs to chunk it and add metadata to it, and it doesn't know what it's doing or doesn't know how to do that well, the information you're going to get back is not going to be particularly good, right? Or worse, it could give you some information, hallucinate some information, just make it up to fill in the gaps, or it can pull together information and then not give you some of the other relevant information that is tied to that. So it's a lot around taxonomy is really important. So spending time in your taxonomy, making clear sense of how you structure your categorization of information, data governance around like permissioning. So access is really important too, right? Like if you want to use AI in your digital workplace, whether it's Copilot or OpenAI or using Azure, and you want to build your own sort of AI solution within Azure, you have to be able to make sure that it's not pulling in from information that user shouldn't have access to. For example, HR data, right? Or payroll data that you may not want to make accessible to everyone. So that's really important as well. And then also just making sure that there's like relevancy scoring against that data so that you're pulling from the most recent, you're pulling from the best. If you've got proposals, for example, hey, that project didn't go so well, or we didn't make any money on that project because we didn't scope it appropriately, probably don't want to use that, right? We want to use the learnings from that, but we don't want to use that scope necessarily as part of our proposal process. So those are the types of things that you want to be able to think about and structure and be mindful of. And I just want to call out one thing. Powell has its own AI chatbot that we can build knowledge bases against. It's done a really good job. It uses OpenAI on Azure OpenAI services, which is a great solution. And it allows us to build those knowledge bases very quickly based on your documentation. So organizations that we collaborate with will say like, hey, let's build an HR knowledge base based on your HR documents, your policies, your benefits information, all that. And then let's build a chatbot that is targeted to that knowledge base. And it allows employees to be able to ask questions and get answers, right? It's again, coming back to that ask generation. That's the expectation that employees have. So that's a bottom up. The expectation that the employees have of the experience that they want and that, they're expecting because it's a consumer grade experience and that we're able to give using the Powell chatbot solution. So we've been really happy with that tool. And I think a lot of our customers have been really happy with that tool. And it allows us to launch that very quickly for our customers without having to do a whole lot of sort of governance work because the governance is built into the tool.
That's really interesting because I think you talked about this expectation from the bottom up of these end users, like they need a consumer grade like experience. And then it sounds like maybe from the top down, from that corporate level, there might be a disconnect on what's actually involved in creating that consumer grade experience for your end users, especially with their digital workplace and their intranet.
Yeah.
I guess like what you mentioned was the data governance and then the taxonomy. I guess, is there any other ways that there's that disconnect from that top down when it comes to implementing something like AI into their intranet or their digital workplace?
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be totally honest with you, I think that there is a mandate right now from the executives that like, hey, this AI thing doesn't seem like it's a fad. Like, I think it's going to stick around and we probably need to be on that train. And so there's a lot of pressure right now on IT departments. I think there's a lot of pressure on, operations teams, on project management to really leverage AI a lot more. If you're a startup and you're working in the technology industry, how are you not using AI, right? Like, I use Replit, I use Vercel, I'm using like all the AI tools. We're building our own, RAG enabled AI systems for customers as well. So we're doing a lot of things and we're using these tools too. So I get it. I mean, that the the desire to do more and the desire to do it faster and the desire to do it better is huge, right? Like, but that's always been there. And now we have these, solutions that allow us to do that. So there's a huge push right now from the top to use those tools and to really make use of those tools, frankly, to try and eliminate cost and potentially waste and go to market faster. I think there's also a recognition that everyone else is using it. So if we're not using it, we're going to fall behind. And that's absolutely true, right? Like organizations that are holding back on AI and waiting to see what happens, you've already fallen way behind at this point. At the same time, I think that the reality is employees are using AI. They're using it in their own personal lives, right? Like who hasn't played with ChatGPT? Who hasn't played with Perplexity? I use Notebook LM for lots of things. My kids, my daughter's going into high school. I've got 2 in middle school, and they're using AI. They're using AI in their classrooms. So the reality is that it's permeating every experience, from education to, I used it with my son to build out a sort of workout routine for his soccer, to get better at soccer. And frankly, my kids now, they don't say, let's Google it. They say, let's ask ChatGPT, right? So that's what I mean by consumer grade experience. The expectation is it's embedded in, it's built into my daily life. I've got it in Gmail. I've got it everywhere. I've got it on my mobile device, and I'm going to expect the same thing, right? Like, why shouldn't I expect that from my digital workplace if I expect that from my digital personal space? So that's what I mean by that expectation of that consumer grade experience. And I think that as organizations, you have one of two options. You either don't own that and you allow your employees to just start using the tools that they are readily available. Frankly, a lot of them are free right now, and still are free, and they're pretty decent on the free level, or they may be paying for it. You don't know that. And if they're doing that and uploading your organizational documents into a ChatGPT or into Perplexity, especially if they're using the free versions of that, what you're doing is a huge risk, because that data is now part of the training material for those LLMs. That's incredibly troubling. That's hugely problematic. So, organizations need to start owning and controlling where that data is held, how you use that, and whether it's looking at Microsoft Copilot or it's looking at a enterprise implementation of OpenAI or Perplexity or, any of these tools, Meta and X and all that. I think what's going to happen is that you're going to lose control of your data. Now you've got massive governance problems. So it's not just about being first to market, being smarter about how you're spending your time, being more efficient and effective, cost-wise. It's also about security and data management and governance. And, so there's a lot happening here. There's a lot of, I think that's a sort of a Venn diagram, right? Of like all of these overlapping things, and employees want to use it because they know that they can do more with less. Executives want people to use it because they know they can do more with less, and they want to certainly not fall behind. And honestly, I find that IT tends to be a little bit more reticent about that. But if they don't own it and control it, it's got a huge impact as well from a security perspective. So there's a lot there. We probably could spend a whole session just talking about that, frankly.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's almost like the next question I had was about like, and you've already kind of touched on it, but the AI, so many AI tools available, and like, how do you prevent AI fatigue to ensure like technology is helpful rather than a distraction?
Yeah.
But it's like from a top-down perspective, it's like, well, there's so much risk if you're not like implementing it properly. It's like, that's where you should start. It's like AI fatigue is going to be like the least of your worries if your data is everywhere training LLMs because everybody's using, the free tools.
Yeah. And this is why we've developed the cognitive operating model, because the whole point is stop treating AI as a tool. Stop looking at the shiny new thing. Start thinking about AI as a platform that we can build our business on. And this is the analogy of, electricity, right? If you think back on like before electricity, when particularly in manufacturing, the manufacturing lines were all built around a centralized engine, right? And it was usually like a water wheel, or maybe it was like a steam engine or something, but it was like you had one and that powered the entire factory. And so you had belts and pulleys and all these things that were driving all these different machinery. And so the machinery had to be placed and designed in a way that worked with that one centralized engine. electricity came along and totally blew that apart, right? And that's where you had the efficiency of being able to realign and rework your entire factory floor around efficiencies and processes. And so now you could have, motors, engines on each one of these machines and just plug them in. And suddenly, we're more efficient, we're more effective. Why? Because we realigned our entire workflows to use the functionality of electricity to drive that efficiency. Okay, let's fast forward, a couple hundred years later. Here we are in 2025, and AI is everywhere. It's in everything. It's permeating everything. And we're still thinking about it as, oh, I can use that AI tool, or I can use that AI tool, or I can use that AI tool, or I can string those AI tools together and start building out these, systems. But what happens when this AI tool changes, because they're changing every day, you know, that breaks, that doesn't work anymore. Now I got to retool the entire thing. Instead, we got to look at our processes. We got to look at our workflows. We got to look at how we actually function as an organization, break that down, think about how we want to connect information and data, and then start seeing, okay, where in this process where we've mapped all these things out, where can AI help? Where does a human have to be involved? And where can we leverage both, right? So what things can AI take over that can still work through the entire system? Where does a human being have to be part of the process, whether it's a decision-making point or it's, it's actually gathering data or information because it's a process that requires that human. And then where can we leverage both so that the AI is delivering information that the human can then respond to, or the human is inputting some instruction that the AI can then take over and leverage the information that it's been given previously. Once we start doing that, we start mapping that out and designating human AI both, then we can come back and organize and architect the actual process and start leveraging AI as that platform. Suddenly, we're realigning all of our work streams to use the AI instead of putting the AI in places to our existing work streams, right? Which is broken and already isn't working. And we've seen that a lot. That's where that 95% of AI, workflows aren't even working anymore. I think that hopefully that answered your question, but I think that's kind of where we are, where we have to really be thinking about our process and our workflows differently. We can't just keep thinking about applying chatbots and copilots to our existing workflows. It's not going to work long term.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think that was a fantastic way to kind of wrap things up. It's not easy, right? Like there's so much changing so quickly, and a lot of organizations right now, maybe they're struggling with how to implement this stuff. So how would if an organization wants to get in touch with Stitch and work with you, Erick, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can look for me on LinkedIn, Erick Straghalis, ERICK, or you can find us at StitchDX.com, all one word. And obviously you can find me at Substack at BAIReady.ai or BAIReady.substack.com.
Beautiful. And if you want to look more into Stitch or Powell, you can find Powell Software. So Powell, Powell -software.com. You can look us up there if you want to get in touch. And again, if you want to get in touch with me specifically, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much, Erick, for all this amazing knowledge. We really appreciate it. And yeah, let's have an amazing rest of our day.
Thanks, Shawn.